At 4:53 in the late afternoon, Port-au-Prince holds its breath without knowing it. In the market at Delmas 33, a girl named Nadij balances a bowl of mangoes and limes on her head. Radios chatter taxis off the main road. A school bell rings uphill. The city is light and noise and heat stacked in layers of concrete walls poured like cakes. Columns thin as wrists. I are not where it should be. The slow clouds above the bay throw shadows across the hills of jealousy, across the bright paint and tarps, and the uncountable blocks of pale gray. She does not hear the first slip beneath the crust. Nobody does. It arrives as a pause, as if someone had taken the city between both hands and considered it. Then the ground flexes. The street shivers. Carts rattle. A woman laughs at the suddenness. Only a truck, she says. The truck does not appear. Instead, a deeper sound writhes through the street, a groan from inside the earth. The shaking hits all at once. A whip. Power lines clink against poles like a frantic bell. The stall next to Nadaj's tilts and then flips, jars cracking green papayas, tumbling and bursting like wet hearts. An old man tries to run and goes nowhere. The pavement moves in waves. Something screams in metal. The white facade of a clinic across the road blurs as dust leaps from its joints. Hairline cracks, racing like living things. Then a slab lets go. The building folds as a child folds paper. She stumbles, the bowl clattering away, limes skittering underfoot like marbles. The street shrieks. Helmets crack, headless rebar rips clothes, and a bus lurches. Windows blister outward. A mushroom of powdered cement turns noon to dusk. A smell risses crushed stone, hot dust, something metallic, something that makes the throat close and eyes burn. Beneath it, the low animals' noises of people pinned and people begging and people burying their faces in their arms and waiting for whatever comes. The quake lasts seconds. It lasts forever. Mountains fall down the slopes in avalanches of tin roofs. In Cataforfias, a hillside slides and carries a house and a house and a house into the street. In Pichenville, a dance studio collapses onto a bakery. In Liagain, the earth simply opens, and 70–80% of the town becomes rubble. A hospital loses its roof and then its floors. Patients in beds go from bright rooms to a well of dust and screaming. The National Palace, so imperial and white, sags like a tired face. Silence returns the way a fist unclenches. Dust hangs. The city is a mosaic of broken plains. Dogs howl. Then the chorus of voices begins calling names first, then prayers, then orders, then sobbing. Across the market, Nadij blinks and realizes daylight is choked. Her left leg answers pain with the kind of bright, clean sentence that will not tolerate argument. She reaches for it and her hand meets the edge of a slab of masonry. She is pinned from the waist down. Timung mung. Someone is crying, little mother. Ti-man-man, demu. Hands appear in the dust. They are neighbors' hands. No sirens come yet. There is no grid to call them. The men from the tap-top pull at a block and grunt and let go and try again. A girl with a red ribbon in her hair offers a cloth for a mask. The neighbor who hollered at Nadij that she should go to school comes back with a crowbar made from a piece of truck leaf spring. He wedges it under the slab and leans. The slab thinks about it. It thinks slowly. On the radio that still works, someone is calm and disbelieving. Magnitude 7, epicenter near Liagain. A voice repeats prayers. Another voice whispers that the cathedral is gone. The phone network dies under the same weight as the buildings. The news is sudden in the same way an avalanche is sudden. It is not news at all, but the physics of fatigue, finding a flaw and exploiting it all at once. Concrete laid with too much sand cannot grip. Steel that isn't there cannot hold. No one mentions building codes because, for most, codes are a word they might have heard and never seen. Short columns designed by nobody in particular fail in the way they always do. Rapid, brittle. Without telling you first, in a city where so much has been built by hand, by necessity, by patience, structure is a trust exercise with gravity. When one element gives up, all the load finds another path, and then that path gives up too. A man we can call Jonas, because names are how people survive, wedges his shoulder against the slab pinning net. He is thin and angry and will not stop, and the crowbar squeals. A corner rises an inch. She gulps air that tastes like crushed coral. "Can be," he says. "Hold." Something pops. Bits of aggregate skip like thrown rice. The slab climbs another inch, maybe two. "F-vit," he says. Quick hands reach in and pull her up, drag her sideways. Her leg argues with light. She comes out from the shadow and sees a scene that does not belong to the hour it finds itself in. People white with dust like ghosts, people bleeding, a woman rocking with a child in her arms, whose eyes are stars that look at nothing. She tries to stand and the leg folds, so they hold her by the armpits and walk a little and stop because the way is not a way anymore. Only a field of broken teeth around deep mouths. Fires begin where propane tanks busted their valves open. Across the neighborhood, the soundtrack is entire families reciting the Psalms. Night comes. The Radio S batteries give up, and the songs of the frogs in the drainage ditch are swallowed by a new wave of sound. Lower, rolling. At first she thinks it is an ambulance from another town that has found a way in. Then the ground trembles again. Aftershock, they would call it. The earth adjusting. The geology negotiating its own aftercare. But there is another sound underneath. A breath that never belonged to the ground. It comes from far away and everywhere at once. A body of something moving toward something else. Not the crumpled steel hiss of a city, but the living sough of volume moving with its own logic. Nottage, propped against a broken wall, closes her eyes and listens as if it can tell her what it means. A man on the corner lifts his head the way a dog hears thunder before the storm, in the pitch of the street, with candles stuck in old bottles and the tiny blue stars of phone screens, like a constellation of lost boats. The noise gathers mass. To the east, over an ocean she rarely thinks about, except for the hotels by the water. A wind has turned the tide into an engine. In another city, another year, another poverty made of different materials. The same low sound has begun. On a staircase that smells of bleach and blood and the brackish breath of a coastal storm, water has already started to climb. It comes up the stairwell, like a person who knows the house. First, it is a trickle under the emergency room gates, a grin of darkness lapping at shoe soles. Then it is a hand, then a knee, then a hip. The storm has no face, but in Beira, Mozambique, everything knows it has arrived. Celeste holds the flashlight in her teeth as she tapes a plastic sheet over a window that no longer exists. The light shakes with her breath. Outside, Cyclone Idai screams its high, thin vowels around the hospital like a choir of needles. It is the night of March 14th into the morning of March 15th, 2019. The wind has been at this for hours, erasing edges, locating weaknesses. The city lies on a low plain that pretends to be land and is in fact a promise the sea made and can withdraw. She is a nurse, which means she has taken care of more things than she can name. The generator died, woke, died again. The old man with pneumonia on bed 7 is a shadow. The pregnant woman with the fever looks past. Celeste says a prayer to a mother whose picture is pinned to a wall that now shifts with the flexing of the hospital's bones. The staff have moved the beds away from the outer walls because the outer walls disgorge their windows into the night. The roof is full of noise. Idai is a thing of wind, yes, but it is also a geography exam. Beira is a hub. The port hums in good weather. The roads inland to Busia and west to Zimbabwe move the economies of others. When all of that meets the Indian Ocean and the Pungu and the Buzi rivers at a spring tide, storm surge becomes not a wave, but a territory. Mangroves cut back to make room for houses cannot break what they are missing. Seawalls where they exist are low, old, or promised. Agua, somebody says. Agua, agua. Water, as if naming it helps. It roars up from the corridor floor drain. It pours under the theater door after the wind pries it open like a bad dentist. Celeste feels it in her shoes, and then her shins, and then her thighs. It is warm, ghosted with hospital cleaners and whatever the river hauled this far. A plastic chair floats past with the slow determination of a migrating animal. She grabs the bed frame and says to the boy on it, "Segura. Hold." He grips with a child's desperate seriousness. He has a stitched scalp and eyes the size of hope. He watches Celeste listen to the building. The ceiling breathes. The walls twitch. Somewhere outside, entire roofs are traveling. Bera built what it could with what it had. Stand in some neighborhoods, and you can put a hand on 2 houses at once. One with a poured concrete frame and bars on the windows. Another with brick worn thin with humidity. Mortar salted, a door hung on a hinge made from a kink in a piece of wire. The clinic in Monjava that used to be a school still has chalk ghosts of lessons high on the walls, where only a storm can read them. That infrastructure is not only pipes and beams. It is the channels that connect people to help, money to materials, plans to action. If the map of a city is a nervous system, Bera's nerves are exposed, and their insulation is thin. The water keeps rising, and nobody has time to know it's citywide. Somewhere the airport is a puddle. Somewhere the timber yard is a raft. Somewhere in Chota, a block between a road and a ditch, families climb onto corrugated iron roofs and lie there like seals while the wind tries to roll them off. The road out to Busey will be cut by morning, the rail ripped and shifted laterally by current as if a child bumped it with a knee. Celeste and a junior doctor named Tomas improvise an evacuation that is not an evacuation so much as a slow retreat uphill, bed by bed. 2 higher floors that become lower floors in an hour, and then they are just floors. And then they are basements filling with water while the sea discusses the architecture. The lights die completely. The phone with the flashlight dies. The other nurse holds a candle in a bottle until the flame goes horizontal under a draft from a new hole the wind has invented. In the emergency vestibule, Sandlist water chews at a stack of file folders and scatters the anonymity of paperwork. Names and numbers become islands, and then just damp fibers. With ink halos, the world wants to be one thing again. Up, Celeste says to the boy. Her arms burn, but it is a familiar burn. The kind of burn that is a tally of how many people you decided mattered in a night. He is small. He becomes smaller when he's wet. They go up, and the water goes up too. And then they open the door to the next landing, and there are more people, and there is less floor. From the roof, they can see pieces of the city outlined in light, only when lightning wants to show them. In those strobes, the port cranes bowing, the sodium orange of a snapped high-voltage line fizzing in a puddle, the white slide of foam across the low neighborhoods like lace thrown and dragged, a wind-bent palm, a shutter ripped away. 10 darkness. The night is not one storm but many. When the winds slacken, the rivers keep coming. Inland, rain has been feeding them, pressure systems stacking days on days. Mozambique has been hit before by Jokwe, by Dinio, and will be again. Changing oceans load the dice. The people loading the beds onto the roof have no patience for theory. Their hands are soaked and their voices are hoarse, and their ocean is here. When morning decides to make an appearance, the city is a pure map of where concrete met code and where concrete met hope. Celeste watches a family float by on the remains of a door. The mother with her legs wrapped around a rowboat's drowned cousin. The father, waist deep, a white sack balanced on the mother's lap that is heavy enough to be a life's worth of papers and light enough not to drown them. And between them, a girl jammed under her mother's arm like a rescued thing. Eyes the same size as every child's when the world recalculates the rules. Rescue is mostly neighbors at first. Later, a helicopter will tilt over the grid of water and take a photograph, where roofs look like and trees are brushstrokes in brown paint. Later, the picture will go around the world. Now, a man throws a rope from the roof of the clinic to a cluster of people in a swirl, and misses, and pulls it back, and his hands do not bleed, because they have been calloused by a life that trains hands to do this. He throws again. The mother reaches. The water drags. The line touches fingers and almost answers the prayer. The city inhales. It is close enough to count the water drops sliding from her eyelashes. It is close enough to know that some days physics looks like mercy and some days it does not. Se grips. Se grips. The rope is heavy and slick and made for another day, for tying goods to trucks or anchoring a boat. The girl cries me, and the word vanishes under the roar. Celeste, holding a bed frame with her hip while she leans with everything else, sees the grip begin to go slack in the small, human way. All grips go slack under weight. One finger, then the next. The little incremental surrender that could be a choice, could be exhaustion, could be the body calculating even when the mind begs. The rope jerks, stretches, sings, and then whips back and hammers the concrete, a snake too tired to bite. The water receives what it always would have. The mother disappears into a sheet of brown that is not a surface so much as a thickness, and then she is there again, sputtering, eyes wild. The father lunges. The girl does not let him go, and the door tips, and all three become a geometry too complex for anyone not in it to solve. Celeste knows this is what helplessness is. It is wanting so much that your muscles might tear and knowing that the variables outside your body are bigger. The water levels fall eventually. They always do. The question is, who is still in the room when the water leaves? Downriver, villages that began as temporary camps along the high ground are islands now. The city's ring of wetlands cut back for farms, for brick kilns, for those looking for a sliver of ground to Neymar. Not there to breathe for it. A fisherman ties his boat to the roof of a cinder block house, anchored by nothing. Days later, the fear will be disease. Cholera loves a city with broken pipes and warm water. 1,000 miles and 3 seasons away, the same brown water will write its name across a different map. In the high valleys and the long plains of Pakistan, the summer of 2022 arrives like a debt collector. It is heat first, the kind that makes tin roofs into stoves and skins slick in the shade. Then the monsoon that will not end. It is not a poetic monsoon. It is a catalog. A day of rain that sounds like static. Then another. Then another. Then a week in which the pin on the sky ruptures and pours. In the north, lakes that should stay behind rock dams, made by glaciers, take up the habit of breaking those dams. In the south, the Indus fills every shape offered to it, and still wants more. 1/3 of a country has never been underwater all at once before. 33 million people is not a number that fits in a paragraph. It is a number that fits in a landscape, in Sindh, where the land is so flat it cannot remember how to drain. The water stretches from one horizon to the other like a new sea, and the island in that sea is a raised road. And on the raised road there are tents, and under the tents, people trying to sleep in heat that does not let the body cool, with mosquitoes whispering at the ears. No baby stands with her feet in water, the temperature of breath, and watches a line of men in a bulldozer do something that does not look like help. They are opening the embankment. They are choosing to let water in. The men in button-down shirts with their phones and plastic bags say this is necessary to save a town downstream. Noor does not live in that town. Her house is on the far side of the cut. A house a husband built with mud he carried and packed and smoothed. The roof of palm ribs they saved for. The courtyard where her children boxed with their shadows. If you live on a river and you are poor, the river is both address and adversary. Embankments are politics made into dirt. Whoever decides where the water goes, decides whose memory becomes mud. Noor does not want to understand the equations about river stage and flood wave attenuation and the failure of canals. She wants someone to say her courtyard matters, her road matters. The little grove of trees her grandmother planted when Noor's mother was a girl are not a column in a spreadsheet. The men with the bulldozer do not argue with her, because the water does not care. The bucket goes into the dirt. The machine backs up, roars, goes in again. The cut opens, and the water takes it like a throat finally cleared. Nora holds her son's hand too tight. He does not complain. In the simmering light, the sound of the river coming through the breach is like the sound of a train. When the embankment gives way, the current goes sideways. It runs through a cluster of houses, then into fields, then takes the shortest path to the lowest place. All the things that do not float become anchors. All the things that do charpoys, buckets, sandals become a scatter of horses on a chessboard when the hand that plays is not human. Later, the questions will be asked about how the canals clogged with silt under budgets bled thin, about structures meant to fail to spare others that failed in the wrong order, about sugarcane barons' lands saved and laborers' homes sacrificed. In the moment it is people yelling names and the simple triangle of fear formed by water, the body, and distance. Noor's husband, Rafiq, lashes 2 beds together and throws the charpoy raft into the yard. He pushes the children onto it and keeps one hand on the rope and one hand on the polythene sack with their documents. He has a diploma from a vocational school he never used, pinned to the feeling in his chest that he is not, in fact, a small man. He pulls, and the raft slides across currents that run like ropes under a sheet. invisible but insistent. They get to the road, high and hot and lined with the sort of shrubs that survive neglect. They stare at the new ocean, and the new ocean stares back, unblinking. Heat does things to people that are invisible. It makes tempers short and decisions small. It makes the babies cry until they stop, which is worse than the crying. It makes cooking impossible in tents that are, on the best days, shade. Someone comes with a tanker and fills blue drums, and women line up, and someone shouts, and someone cuts the line with a cousin's hand on their elbow. And in the camp by the road to Dadu, a fight breaks out over the long shadow of something simple. The water in the tanker is safe when it leaves the spigot. By evening, the drums are the temperature of tea. By midnight, by morning, with no soap, no sodium hypochlorite, no one responsible for refilling the chlorine stick in the neck of the drum. The water is everything, living and dying. The babies begin to vomit. The men begin to cough in the night, take the shaky breath of lungs that have sat in damp for too long. A snake, displaced and confused, finds a cot by the roadside and is misunderstood. A health worker with a box of oars packets becomes a hero until her box is empty. In Karachi, flood maps glow on the walls of rooms with air conditioning. In Islamabad, a minister says on television that this is climate, that no one can be ready for this. In the camps, nor hears the radio say the sentence and things about when the water was not as big as this, but their fields were as green as he'd ever seen, and then not. And how the government came with tents then, too. She thinks about the whispers that there will be another cut of priver to save a power station. She thinks about the fever her youngest has, the one that makes his eyes too shiny and his skin too hot, and she presses the back of her hand to his forehead and thinks of the road to the clinic that is full of water and men with blankets over their shoulders. When the clinic comes to the man NGO with a banner and a table set up under a tarpaulin, it is a bowl of life in the shade. The nurse has a name, and it is something like every name that has ever been kind. She mixes sugar and salt and water and tells friends to tell friends. She asks about latrines, and the women look at the cracked earth under a tent, and then at the men with the drums, and then somewhere else. The nurse looks across the dust and water and sees a second disaster. In Haiti, after the earth moved and laid people low, the second disaster came as a river's betrayal too. It was the Autobanite. It came with the blue helmets and their broken pipes and an apology that took years to form and did not fill any graves. You can build a shelter with donated tarps and thin poles and call it a neighborhood. You can line a ditch in stone and call it a solution. You can stack promises like sandbags and hope the water respects them. Water is not a listener. It is a long memory with a single subject. Gravity. In the sinned noon, nor hears the rasp in her child's throat turned wet. The boy whose skin burned now shivers. A volunteer leans into the tent and whispers a word. Cholera, which in their language is not a word you say, but a shape you recognize when your hand touches your child's neck and feels nothing there but loss, thinking about how to introduce itself. The volunteer says a truck is coming with vaccines. The volunteer says, "There's enough." She does not know if there is. Under the tent, the air tastes like plastic, and the wind smells like heat and salt, even though the sea is 200 kilometers away. People rise from the road to stand in whatever line is forming. A mother with a baby whose eyes begged the night to end without knowing how to put it is at the front because she got there and did not move. The men with the bulldozer down by the embankment light cigarettes, lean against the machine, watch the new canal they made. No one has gone home. There is no home to go. The child coughs once, and the sound changes from a thing that is human to a thing that is an alarm and an instrument. And Noor feels something give way inside her like a rope that's been holding too long. She stands with him, cradles him the way she once did when he was long with sleep, and the dusk made him warmer. And she takes a step toward the shade of the clinic and finds her way blocked by someone larger than she is, with a cooler of vaccines and a face she will never forget, because his mouth is shaped around the word wait, as if he can slow what happens next by saying it right. The sound in her ears is not one sound. It is her child's breath, and the fan of a generator that starts and stalls, and the flutter of tarpaulin in a wind that cannot be called a breeze because it tastes of rot. It is a voice line with crackle announcing that a consignment of oral cholera vaccine is delayed by a flat tire an hour back. It is someone else screaming in a voice that calibrates a neighborhood. The clinic under the tent is small and shaped by what can fit in the back of a truck. It is also a piece of infrastructure, which is to say, fragile in a way that should be unacceptable and is Again. The health worker holds up a wristband, writes a name that is also an ID. Moves a line. She looks like a person who has stayed awake for more nights than is her allocation this month. She says, "Ores first, and zinc," and passes out sachets with the ferocity of someone handing out life vests on a sinking boat. They run out of cups, then stigmatize less and let people drink from bottles that have been rinsed with water not entirely safe. Because there is a hierarchy even within crisis. To put a city back on its feet is a problem of numbers. To keep a child from dying under a tent in a heat wave is a problem of exactly one body. Newish child sips, vomits, sips again, swallows. An hour becomes a day. When the vaccines arrive, he has turned a corner. A mother behind newer does not resent this. Her eyes soften in the way eyes do when someone else's luck the smallest. Perfect kind becomes a good omen. When Aisha arrives, she does what she always does. She walks to the edge of where the water was highest and looks around as if the ground were a book she can read. She is a forensic engineer. She has been 2 waves and wires, and where they have failed on 3 continents, because that is where her work lives. She is paid to look at broken things and write down their reasons. In Haiti, she ran a finger over the stub of rebar exposed by a broken column and knew, from the way it rusted in brittle flakes, that it had not been what anyone's spec had wanted it to be, and that if it had been, the building might still be this building. In Beira, she stood with Celeste in a corridor where mildew had climbed to the level the water had reached, as if it were a religious painting marking a saint's height, and she had asked about drains, and about pumps, and about budgets, and about flood maps printed and ignored. In Sind, she watches a bulldozer idle and hears a man in a crisp shirt say that the choice was between this and worse. He's not wrong. The worst would have been worse. In Port-au-Prince, the worst already happened. The cholera that came after did not feel like weather. It felt like a decision without a signature. After the earthquake, in the camps on the slopes of Tabar, in Kinana settlement that began as tents and became houses of plywood and cinder block, and in all the places people moved until someone had to put their movement on a map, the thin pipes brought by someone to help were rooted without the faithfulness of gravity in mind. Downhill, downriver, downhill again. Everything ends in a river or a sea. The bacteria rode it like a road. 10,000 graves later, the apology came. The apology did not come with a repair or with money that matched the bills for buried futures. Some things feel like accidents because the hands are too many and the lines of responsibility run abroad like run dry. Some things feel like designed for the same reason. Aisha has a notebook with neat pages and a pen that writes in a thin line as if thinness were humility. She makes a list of small things that, if repeated enough, can become big things. Hand pumps raised on concrete platforms. Houses lifted on plinths that are not the height of an adult yet. A breach that is planned and executed with a map and an evacuation and a warning that arrives in a voice that sounds like someone you will listen to. The same voice, a week earlier, convincing the council to clear the canal that silt has made into a snake that lost its way. She writes microinsurance, and someone in a tent says, "Premium," and makes a face because premium is not a word that belongs in a mouth that tastes of ores. She writes school retrofits and sees a teacher's eyes shine because her school is her country in a small room. In Kathmandu, when Aisha went with friends, after the 2015 quake, she saw another kind of fragility. The buildings were brick and timber and love 100 years old, and in the valley where the ground shakes like a bowl of jelly because of the sediments washed there by rivers eons ago. Those buildings were enemies to themselves. In some places code had existed and been resisted by custom and cost. In others, simple measures had held. Banding courses, ties. The death toll stopped at numbers that in Haiti would have been the beginning, because of everything that is different, and everything that was learned and, crucially, translated into practice. She stuck her head into a doorway and called to a woman whose eyes were the color of tea. "Are you okay? Does okay have meaning?" A drone of hope was in the air, and the Aftershock made an appointment. People set up tents in Potton squares under the palaces their grandparents took them to see. The palaces held in the ways old cookbooks do. Say sees now, in the Pakistan camp under the tent, the same courage, the same as the other places. She also sees the same capacity stretched, the same budgets balanced on the heads of women and children, queuing for a doctor whose kit lives in a plastic bin. She wants there to be a room where all the people who decide gather and sit and breathe the same air as the people who cannot afford air. And she wants the smell of a hospital stairwell when the water climbed it to be hard to forget. The pattern is not a secret. In poor places, the difference between hazard and disaster is infrastructure, what was built when the weather was good and the earth was quiet, and how it was maintained when there was no ribbon to cut. It is governance who pays for what and when. It is exposure who lives on low ground and why. It is the quiet mathematics of risk to whom does a loss hurt most. It is the thing that economists call the protection gap and a mother calls the winter without a roof. The radio in the camp cracks and spits and calls out a new storm coming, not here, but to the east, to a coastline with a long memory and a shorter fuse. The Bay of Bengal is breathing in. In a country shaped like a river delta, people move like people do when a deep lesson is about to be applied. Bangladesh has a system now, born from the hell of 1970, when a cyclone drowned 500,000 people in a night that was less a night than a cut. It has a ledger of the dead from 1991 who died because the shelters were too few and the warnings too late. It is volunteers who walk the villages in bright vests and ring bells and call names. It has cyclone shelters built on pillars, concrete boxers peppered up and down the coast. Not enough. Never enough, but there. In Khulna, a volunteer named Rena checks her list and throws a shawl around her shoulders, even though the air is soup. Her voice is a rope. She will tie it around whoever will take it. She bangs on a door with a stick and a woman opens it with eyes that have already seen the wrong storms. The sky is a wall lowered by a patient, angry hand. The loudspeakers wail. Somewhere, a farmer ties his calves to his boat. Somewhere, a child picks up his schoolbook and tucks it into a plastic bag because he knows that paper hates water. Somewhere, the river that is always delivered and always taken learns a new language for wind. Aisha puts her notebook away not because the questions are answered, but because the moment for asking them is about to be replaced by the moment for standing in the doorway and telling people to go. The road to the shelter is low and pitted. The shelter itself smells of rust and rain from the last time. It is a familiarity that feels like luck. The forecast is not a guess. The cone of uncertainty is a mouth closing. The first drops are stretched and fat and feel like hands. The old men who do not want to leave their cows look at the women who do not want to leave anything and make the face of someone doing a calculation. The door to the shelter bangs on its hinges. In another place, a girl named Nadij grips a plastic chair in a market and thinks about a river she has never seen. In Beira, Celeste sits on the steps of a ward hung with mildew and chalk and closes her eyes in a way that does not mean sleep. The air changes. The horizon disappears. The river widens its shoulders. A rooster crows because it does not understand, and then understands. The first siren in the night is a volunteer with a megaphone. The second is the tin roof of a house teaching the trees above it how to sing. The third is the sea, arriving to negotiate with the land one more time. Tonight, the wind walks with purpose. It comes in low, a weight pressed along the ground, and then it lifts and tries the doors. And then it slips in wherever the map has been careless. The cyclone has many names depending on which version of the radio you listen to, but inside the shelter it has only one, and that is now. Rena keeps the list in her head because paper is faithless in rain. She moves down the aisles between benches where families sit shoulder to shoulder, and she counts heads and stares until memory answers if the count is good. When it is not, she speaks in a tone that makes men older than she is get to their feet and go back out into a storm they have earned the right to avoid. She grew up hearing her mother say bola in a voice shaped like water. She went to school in a room with a poster telling the story of 1991 in numbers and in faces and in drawings, by children who were told to draw what wind looks like. She learned to text in a system that one day would tell her, in the same line as a joke from a cousin, that the tide will be higher than the village. It is high, and the village follows the old script. But tonight, the script has been revised. The door to the shelter slams and shuts and bars. On the roof, the wind tries to peel the edges of the building like a label and cannot. The generator hums to life. The midwife lays out her clean delivery kit, because babies do not read forecasts. A boy with a kite string wrapped twice around his wrist watches the palm trees at the edge of the schoolyard bow in the only direction trees are interested in tonight. And he feels a thrill that mixes with fear and makes a new thing. The river comes up, and the lights go out. for the houses that did not use their children's school as a place to hide. In the dark, walking with water up to their knees. The last of the stragglers wade in behind Rena and she closes the door, and the square of night outside becomes a rectangle of sound. Waves thump the stairs to the second floor. The building shivers but does not lie, because the code that made it obeyed the laws that asked concrete to do what it is made to do, and the men who mixed the pour were paid enough to measure. Outside, a cow is lifted, and a fisherman's boat grieves the palm it is tethered to, and then the rope phrased and the boat is free. A palm explodes into leaves that travel into the storm like birds that forgot their nests. The storm is everything at once, the inland push of water that rises, and the outward pool of a river that cannot wait. It spends itself on the coast, then spends itself inland, the way a drunk spends money he never had. In the shelter, people listen. The sound of wind is not one sound. It is 1,000, each one a thread in a rope, and the rope is what the night uses to tie itself to the floor. Then a different sound confesses itself. The wailing from the west, that is a door torn and thrown. The bang of a tank of cooking gas, beginning to roll like a very heavy toy. The crack inside a pillar that is truly only a crack in the plaster. They do not panic, because they have been taught, because the woman at the front says a prayer in a pitch that decides how the room will breathe. The storm passes in the way storms do, which is to say, it does not end. It softens, and moves away, and finds another shore. In the morning, the shelter door opens onto a road that is a river that is a road, and houses that have obeyed the same instructions as their ancestors low, and anchored with stories lie on their sides. But the count on the benches in the shelter is almost the same as the count was last night, and that number is the difference between a poor nation being hit hardest as a sentence, and as a story that can, in places, be read. Rena wades into the courtyard and looks at the flagpole. The flag still hangs. She takes a picture with a phone that lived wrapped in polythene under her blouse all night. She will send it later. Back where the Indus has made an ocean of the interior, the water recedes as if embarrassed by how far it went. It leaves the ring of damp on walls, and salt in soil, and a catalogue of small and large losses, fields white with silt, where rice cannot grow for years, a school library where every page turned into pulp, a family house that turns to a rectangle of brown and then is a memory of a rectangle. Noor's child lives and wakes and asks for a sweet, and Noor knows this is one of the days she will count first when she gets old and has a list to keep herself from falling. She will also remember the bulldozer and the rope and the man with the cooler who said wait, and she will remember the day a woman in a vest wrote her name and her child's name and then got both wrong and apologized in a laugh cry that made them both not mine. In Beira, Celeste walks into the hospital when the smell has been chased from most corners, and tiles are on the walls again, and she runs her fingers along the stain that marks the height of Idai, and counts two today, and thinks about Dinio and Gombe and what the next one will be called and whether the walls have been told what they must do. She keeps a pair of old shoes for the roof. She sleeps with her phone by her bed and a torch in the kitchen. She knows the names of the people who live around her by the sound of their footsteps in water, the way a person should. Port-au-Prince hums, as it always has, the hum pitched by its engines, and its music, and its markets, and the trills of phones. Canaan sprawls on the northern plains, where a tent city grew into streets named 4 Presidents and 4 Hopes. Jerusalem, Riyadh, Tokyo. Nadich sells limes again with a limp that is its own biography. And in hurricane season, she looks east more than she used to. The palace still sags when you close your eyes and pull it up. The city still leans forward toward the next morning. The story people tell about fragile infrastructure and massive losses. It's not one story. It is a family of them that share a face. In poor countries, the margin is thin to begin with. Every unreinforced wall, every informal settlement perched on a slope, every drain blocked with plastic and politics, every hospital that is a building before it is a system each, is a pixel in a picture that fills with water, and rubble faster than others can fill with aid. But poverty is not destiny defined only by loss. When money is not enough, but governance is good, and ideas are stubborn, lives are saved. Bangladesh stands as a proof that community volunteers, radios, cyclone shelters, warnings in a voice that matters, and a plan repeated until it is muscle memory can turn the math of catastrophe inside out. In Vietnam, mangrove forests replanted hold shorelines with their millions of fingers where concrete alone would fail. In the Philippines, kids learn to drop under desks and hold a book over their heads. because in their 3 languages, earthquake is a word with a plan attached. In Nepal, masons in villages tuck rebar belts around houses like gifts. In Mozambique, a new master plan draws on an old sense. Don't build where the sea will come, and if you must, build like the sea is a partner who will have its say. No charity can make the floor of the world level all at once, but policy can. Debt can be rethought. Insurance can reach into tents, if designed for tents. Lenders can learn to value a dike as much as a dam, a storm drain as much as a highway. Codes, written, must be codes, enforced. And if you make enforcement an act of love, a father refusing to sign off on walls that will crush someone else's child, it will make a different kind of city. The children in the shelter in Kulna file out when the water warms into the road, and the light turns from blue to gold, and the sound of the day resumes its ordinary arguments. They carry their books in bags that kept them dry. The volunteer hands out biscuits. The head count on her list of names meets her eyes and smiles. Somewhere, a minister takes credit. Somewhere else, someone who counted sandbags in silence the night before shrugs and goes back to his small shop because the day is the day, no matter what it spent itself on. Nadej sells a bag of limes to a man who will press them into a drink and hand it to someone who is talking about roads in a meeting room miles away. She counts the coins, straightens, watches the light on the hills, thinks of the man who levered the slab that pinned her and how he smoked after and his hands shook and he said nothing at all. Across oceans, under tarps and under steel, in rooms that will flood and rooms built high enough to resist. People do what people do when the world insists on itself. They choose each other. They choose to hold the rope until it cannot be held and then to add one more hand. They choose to learn a name and repeat it into a stairwell filled with water. They choose to go door to door with a list and a voice that makes sense and makes the difference between the list and the morning. If stories like this move you, subscribe for more true events that change the world.